Let's get this out of the way. The biggest positive I can give Spider-Man Homecoming is we didn't have to watch Uncle Ben die in the street again. Are you guys ready to shoot some web together? That just sounds weird, doesn't it? Now, before we swing into Spider-Man Homecoming, did you like that pun right there? I first want to talk about The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And like or hate that movie, due to its underwhelming performance and critical reviews, it is essentially the main reason that Sony said, "Here, Marvel, take Spider-Man, borrow him, do whatever you want with him. Please just make a good movie with Spider-Man." And isn't it crazy? Like, it happened. Everyone for years craved this. They begged, they pleaded, they always typed on the internet, "Give it to Marvel, let them make the movie." And isn't that just crazy how things work? Sometimes it takes a really bad movie to get a really good movie. Spider-Man Homecoming catches up with Peter Parker right after the events of Captain America Civil War. And we see Peter Parker becoming that friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, who also desperately hopes that Tony Stark will call him up one day to join the Avengers. And then you have the villain, Batman himself, playing the Vulture. Now, the best way to describe Spider-Man Homecoming is, it's almost like a high school teen comedy movie, but with Spider-Man in it. And when you're watching this movie, you can tell it draws heavy inspiration from those 1980s John Hughes teen comedy movies. For example, they recreate one of the iconic scenes that you see in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but my only problem with it is they recreate the scene with Spider-Man in it, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, that's cool, that's clever, and then 2 seconds later, they show the actual scene from Ferris Bueller's Day Off on a large screen TV in the same scene. And it felt completely unnecessary. The only reason that they did that is so younger viewers who have no clue what Ferris Bueller's Day Off is would comprehend the joke. But that's like me telling you a joke and then going, "Did you get it? Did you see what I did there?" I know, that sounds like a nitpicky complaint, but little things like that stick out to me in movies and take me out of it. But as far as the tone of this movie goes, being a high school teenage comedy, coming to age movie, that's what I wanted to see in a Spider-Man movie. And I really felt like Spider-Man Homecoming captured those things, because in the other Spider-Man movies, we got to see Peter Parker in high school doing high school activities, but there was always just something off about it. I really never felt like he was a high school kid doing these things. It just felt like a 25-year-old dude playing a teenage kid, or maybe it's because they never really dived into depth and gave you much substance with that aspect of Peter Parker's life. But in Spider-Man Homecoming, that's what it's all about. And this movie understands that, and with that, I feel like this film gave us the best representation of Peter Parker and Spider-Man we've ever seen up on the big screen. Now, if you're a hardcore Spider-Man fanboy and minor character changes trigger you, well, get ready to get triggered. In this movie, they do switch things up and change things just for the sake of changing them and switching them. And I didn't really feel like all of it was necessary. For example, the character of Flash Thompson in previous Spider-Man movies and comic book adaptations, Flash looks something like me. He sort of looks like a jock douche meathead. "Hey Parker, you better stay out of my way or I'm going to beat you up after school." But in Spider-Man Homecoming, Flash Thompson is now a 5'5", nerdy genius kid who's also on the academic decathlon team, and he calls Peter Parker Penis Parker. And that's just one of many changes that this film makes to supporting characters. Is that a deal breaker? It didn't really bother me, but it just felt unnecessary. Now let's talk about the Marvel Universe aspect of this movie. Throughout this movie, there's tons of references to the Avengers, and you also see Tony Stark and Iron Man pop up 3 or 4 times in the movie, and that was one of the biggest fears I had going into this movie. I wanted to see a Spider-Man movie, not an Iron Man movie. And I am happy to say this is definitely a Spider-Man movie, and all of the scenes with Tony Stark and Peter Parker were great scenes. They were some of the best scenes in the movie, and all of the advice that Tony Stark gives Peter Parker in these scenes, it matters. It helps develop his character and it makes him a better version of Spider-Man. So as far as making Spider-Man Homecoming feel like part of the Marvel Universe, it does a really good job at balancing things. It felt like it was part of that universe, and it also felt like it was its own thing. And before I move on to the next thing, the biggest positive I can say about this movie being in the Marvel Universe is there's no Infinity Stone in this movie. Yay! Hey, come here, hey, come here, hey, hey. That's my Beetlejuice impression. It's not very good, But this movie stars Michael Keaton as the villain of the film, the Vulture. The guys went from Batman to Birdman to the Vulture. He has a thing for winged characters. Now, Michael Keaton has such a screen presence about him where he can take a boring character and make him interesting, and more or less, that's what I felt like he did with the character of the Vulture in this film. Now, I will say the backstory and character motivation on how Michael Keaton's character becomes the Vulture happened a little quickly. The movie basically gives you this very quick 3-minute scene setting up his character motivation on why a normal guy would turn into the Vulture. But once again, I really did enjoy the concept of the Vulture. I bought into his criminal activity and it made sense within the Marvel universe. Because in this movie, they do take something from the Avengers films that you could have just tossed away or swept under the rug, and they make that a plot point and a character driving force for why the Vulture does what he does. And I really appreciate things like that because they took what could have been wasted potential and they utilized it for this character. Now, let's talk about Spider-Man himself, Tom Holland. This guy is Spider-Man. He's probably the best representation of Spider-Man we've seen. He actually resembles a teenage kid. I bought into it. I enjoyed it. I have no complaints with Tom Holland as Spider-Man. For me, Tom Holland is the Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, I've wanted to see up on the big screen for a very long time. But with all that said, my only big complaint with Spider-Man in this movie is his overcomplicated, overconvoluted, high-tech Tony Stark Iron Man spider suit. And it's like, I get it, Tony Stark created your Spider-Man suit, but it's a little bit too heavy-handed with some of the technological advancements. And there's times in this movie where you feel like Peter Parker is inside of another Iron Man suit shooting webs. For the sake of the story and his character arc, I understand that they needed to have some high-tech features in his suit, but they went a little bit too overboard in the movie. As far as the comedy goes in this movie, it works. This is a funny movie. I would say it's almost funnier than Guardians of the Galaxy. And once again, the movie didn't have to bore us with watching Uncle Ben die again, but on a quick side note, Aunt May in this movie, played by Marisa Tomei, I like Marisa Tomei. Have you guys ever seen the movie The Wrestler? Check it out. In many ways, this movie is an origin story telling you how Peter Parker becomes a better Spider-Man without recreating all the boring stuff we've already seen 25 times. And I also really enjoyed how self-aware this movie was. There's a scene where Spider-Man's running across a big field because he doesn't have any buildings to shoot onto. And you think to yourself, yeah, if Spider-Man was just in a big field, I guess he couldn't really swing anywhere. So it's things like that I really enjoy. Now, this isn't a perfect movie. I do have some complaints with some of the subplots of the film. All of the villainous henchmen in this movie were a little bit over the top and just boring to watch. It's like, oh, whoa, that random bad guy is now this villain that I've heard of before. But there's no character motivation or logic behind it, but he's just going to be him now. Okay. And it doesn't come across as very creative. It just feels like a waste of time. All right, let me whip out my web slinger. Don't get scared now. I'm going to give Spider-Man Homecoming... I'm going to give this movie a B+. That's a pretty good score. It's almost an A, but I said my negatives, and that's why I can't quite give it that A score. But I will say, this is probably my favorite Spider-Man movie. I do feel like watching it again, and that rarely happens. That's my take on Spider-Man Homecoming. Now here's my question for you, and let me know down below. If you've seen the movie, what did you think about it? Or which villain would you like to see in the next Spider-Man movie? And don't leave just yet. I wanted to let you guys know about this app called Popcorn Trivia. If you guys like movies, which I'm assuming you do if you're watching this video, and you like answering movie trivia questions, well, definitely check out Popcorn Trivia. Popcorn Trivia is a completely free to download app. You can download it on iOS or Android, and you can answer movie trivia questions about hundreds of different movies. You can play movie trivia by yourself or go up against other people who also have the app. If you get questions right, you earn points, and you can also learn other factoids about the movies as you play. Once again, Popcorn Trivia is completely free to download. I'll put all the links down below in the description box. Check it out. You can play it in the car, you can play it in the bathroom, wherever you want. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe. That way I can see you next time. Yeah, click that little button right there.